Ooh, switch over. All right. Going live. What's up? Wait just a few minutes here. Okay, it looks like I'm fully live now. Hey there, everybody. Chatzu here. I'm going to be premiering the newest short story that I have written. Now, just to be clear, all these readings that I'm doing, these may not necessarily be the final drafts. Like, there's a few changes I'm probably going to make to this one, which this one is called A Reaper's Day Off. And I have actually pre-recorded and edited it. Though, full disclosure for anyone who has seen my previous live streams, I'm not very good at reading my own short stories, so this is going to be the last one that I do a reading like this of. I'm probably going to try to get them edited at least to a somewhat readable state, even though if there's still a couple of mistakes here and there, or possibly even some major ones knowing me, and then I'm going to post the results on Substack, and the actual professional edited versions are what's going to go into the short story compilation book, Tales from the Trilateral Realms, which is going to have 8 short stories, and this is going to be the 5th one. The first 4, or wait, is it the 5th one or the 6th one? I might have gotten that wrong. Hey, what's up? I'm looking at the wrong place. What's up? But yeah, so this story, it's pre-recorded and edited, although if you've ever seen my other ones, hey, got the gearhead. But yeah, if you've ever seen my other ones, I'm not very good at reading these, and the editing that I did can only do so much. And with this one in particular, I got about halfway through before I realized that I was editing the silence out a little too much, so it kind of jumps super fast for at least the first half. But it's at least in a understandable state. But yeah, since you're just now joining, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and try to edit the stories on my own as best as I can. I'm going to use like Grammarly and stuff like that, as well as watching just videos educating myself better on punctuation and stuff like that, because I'm absolutely horrendous at it right now. And I'm going to post those versions on Substack. I got to look into figure out how that works more. I've created a Substack, but I haven't really posted anything really on it. And then the actual professionally edited versions are what are going to go into the compilation book, Tales from the Trilateral Realms. So yeah, let me go ahead and get this recording ready. Okay, it's ready to go, and once I go live, I'm going to mute myself and then just have desktop audio going, playing the edited clip. And then I'm going to have the little thumbnail that I made, which I kind of had to scramble on that. Usually I've got a drawing pad that I try to make them on, but no matter what, it probably wasn't going to look all that great. Because I'm also still learning how to draw. And, but yeah, I literally did just go into Paint and kind of toss that together. I didn't even bother with the hand. I'm like, it kind of looks abstract to begin with, which I actually thought it came out looking kind of interesting, if amateurish. I thought the colors popped. But, so yeah, let me go ahead and mute myself, switch over, and I will play the story. Alright, here we go. Alright, so webcam off first. Mute, and then here we go. The train came to a stop with a booming horn and a sharp screech. It was not loud enough to wake the sleeping reaper, who had drifted off about halfway to his destination. He did not need to sleep, but it was an activity he enjoyed greatly. In fact, he did not need to take the train at all. Once every 100 years, a Reaper is able to return to wherever they reside for a full 24 hours. They were not required to do so, but most did not pass up on the vacation of a century. Although most Reapers did not take this train to their stop. It was not a train meant for their kind. The train ride home was one of the many vices the Reaper allowed himself on these days. He would always drift off into dreams about what he would do with his day. Reapers do not dream in the way that you or I do, mind you. They do not technically sleep at all, for that matter. What they do would be impossible to describe, but in a sense, they let their minds wander to another place. A place where their so-called dreams manifest until such time as they no longer dream them. This particular dream was interrupted by a tap on the Reaper's shoulder. The conductor stood over him, sharply dressed as usual, and wearing a serious face that did not match his polite disposition. "Begging your pardon, sir. Last stop." The Reaper looked behind him as if there was something to see outside the window beside the black void. Were his skull able to form a smile, he would have done so. He stood up, thanked the conductor, and handed him a coin. Grabbing his scythe, he turned it backwards and knocked on the train door 3 times. They opened themselves, and he stepped through. Rather than a platform, the Reaper stepped out into a hallway. The train doors closed behind him. When the 2 sides met, they formed a single wooden door with a turning handle. If you were to look at it through a microscope, you would not be able to tell there had been 2 halves. No sooner had this happened than the Reaper spotted a large spider web between the opposite wall and the ceiling. Close by, a spider waited for prey that would never come. The Reaper figured he must have accidentally let it in the day before. He reached out his bony hand and let the spider crawl onto his finger. Turning back to the door he had entered through, the Reaper again knocked thrice upon it. This time, he opened it in the way one would normally open a door with a handle, and on the other side was now a wooded area. He leaned down and the spider scurried off, disappearing into a bush. The Reaper stepped back, closed the door, and knocked for a final time. He looked again at the cobweb. His robes needed washing anyway, so he pulled his hand into his sleeve and wiped the wall clean. He then made his way to his room, opened his wardrobe, and pulled out an evening robe that was the same shade of dark red as his work pair. For a moment, he caught a glimpse of himself in a mirror. It had been so long since his features had fallen away, and yet his skeletal appearance still occasionally gave him pause. Leaving his room, he found himself in front of yet another door. Now, before we go any further, it is important to know that despite the abridged nature of the telling of these events, these locations were quite a distance from each other. This Reaper, as all Reapers, lived in a grand mansion, one with so many rooms and hallways that it would take at least half a day to explore them all. In the event that this sounds intriguing to you, it is also important to note that unless you are invited, you will not be able to find any of these mansions, let alone enter them. So go ahead and stop packing your bags. The particular door the Reaper now stood in front of did not lead to just any room. Inside was a black void, much like the one outside the train. As he walked through, he shut the door attached to the non-existent wall behind him. He walked over to a cabinet that had not been there when he opened the door, and pulled out a kettle. He set the kettle on a stove that had not been there when he opened the cabinet, and walked over to a large comfy chair that had not been there when he lit the stove. As he waited for the water to boil, the Reaper pondered who would take his place for the day. He hoped, for the sake of those poor unfortunate souls, that it would be the Pale Lady. Her warm and gentle presence was enough to put even the most terrified person at ease. Perhaps it would be the constable. Just the thought made his bones do something resembling a shiver. Each Reaper had a name and a title. Their name was what they chose, and their title was what others called them. The others called him the Grim One. The kettle began to whistle, so the Reaper pulled a cup and a bag of green tea from the cabinet. At this point, some of you may be wondering how a skeleton drinks tea. Under normal circumstances, This would be a perfectly valid question. However, this room was anything but normal. The Reaper referred to it as the Impossible Room. It was made up of the same space where Reapers dreamed, and once the room was empty, it ceased to exist. It was a room that did not follow any rules that you or I would comprehend. The Reaper often came here to think. The taste of the green tea, though even he could not explain to you how he could taste it without a tongue, made him feel whole again. The room even allowed the tea not to spill through his ribs. Were he ever able to retire, he hoped it would be to a place like this. When he was done with his tea, the Reaper left the room. No sooner did the door close than a loud popping noise echoed throughout the house. It had come from outside. He made his way to the back door that was closest to the sound, and found his car had smoke coming out of its hood. Upon opening it, he discovered a sight that lived up to his title. The car had been put under a spell to drive itself to greet visitors, and had forgotten to turn itself off. How long had it been since he had visitors again? Based on the car's condition, he knew that replacement transportation would be needed. It would probably be a good idea to check around for any other issues. Since he was already outside, he would check that first. The house was located on an island at the top of a small mountain. Surrounding the island was a dark, thick fog that blocked out the sun and caused an atmosphere of perpetual night. He tapped the bottom of his scythe on the ground, and flowers all over the island began to glow, giving him better sight to begin his search. It took him a few hours to check everywhere, after which he went back inside through the front door. When checking the lower floor, it did not take him long to notice something wrong. In a ceiling corner of the main hall, there was an unusual crack. The thing that made it so strange was that inside the crack was a faint red glow. Given the nature of the island, which only he had a full understanding of, the Reaper had an idea of what was causing this. Now he just needed to find the source. After thoroughly checking to make sure it had not spread to any other room on the first floor, he made his way upstairs. As he walked, he wondered how long this had been happening. He had stuck to only a few rooms for the last few years. He hadn't even entered the main hall in at least a decade. Could the crack have been forming for that long? The Reaper found more cracks in the floor of several upstairs rooms, all snaking around to an unseen destination. Eventually, his hunt led him to yet another door, one that he recalled from a distant memory. He had only ever entered it once before. Inside was a small, simple closet. In the center of the floor, where all the cracks met, was a small hole. He knew exactly where this led, and he was in no mood to see it open any further. The Reaper pointed his scythe to the ground and tapped the back of it on the floor 3 times. All at once, the cracks began to crawl back towards the hole, which shrunk until it was no larger than the point of the scythe. It would not stay this way, but there was nothing he could do to prevent that. He could, however, slow it down. He knelt down and placed his hand over the insignificant opening. Words came from him that even one who would have stood beside him would not have been able to hear. The Reaper then stood back up, stepped back out of the closet, and shut the door. Without moving from the spot, he touched the back of his scythe to the center of the door. In a matter of seconds, there seemed to now be only a wall where the door had been. If he did have any guests, it would be best for them not to stumble upon this closet. As soon as he was finished, the chimes of a grand clock shouted throughout the house. His day was up. Changing back into a freshly laundered work robe, the Reaper made his way back to the door he had first arrived through. He knocked 3 times and left to begin his work again. All right, there we go. I actually think I misread a part there. He doesn't touch the back of it to make it invisible. He touches the tip. Maybe I miswrote that part, but anyway. I've got a lot to go through and correct in that, but yeah, the general story came out the way I was intending it to, so not a whole lot of major changes are going to be needed before the final version is actually put up. But yeah, that was A Reaper's Day Off, which I just kind of wanted to do a little sort of slice of life story in that one, as well as building up some of the lore, because the thing with each story in the Trilateral Realms is if I establish something in one story, I can't contradict it in another story without giving a reasonable explanation for why it's different in that one. So yeah, that's also what's making it quite difficult to write some of these, because I've got to go through at least like 100 stories and go, okay, am I contradicting myself at any point, or is that going to make something I do in another story impossible? So unfortunately, that kind of makes it to where I wind up thinking about all these stories more than I do actually writing them, and I really need to stop doing that. But yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and into this here. I'm going to post, well, this one's going up automatically on YouTube, but I'm also going to post just the story itself, which is going to be a lot easier and a lot quicker of a turnaround since I already have it edited. But yeah, that's going to be that. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed. This is Chatzu, signing out.